Chapter 9. The cat that can grin. For a minute or two Alice stood and looked at the house. She didn't know what to do next. Suddenly a servant in livery ran out of the forest. He had the face of a fish, but Alice knew that he was a servant because he was in livery. He knocked at the door of the house. Another servant in livery opened it. He had a round face and large eyes like a frog. They looked so funny. Alice came a little nearer. She wanted to see and hear better. The fish servant had a great letter under his arm. He gave it to the frog servant and said, "From the Queen. She is asking the Duchess to come to play croquet." Then they bowed to each other. It was so funny that Alice began to laugh. She laughed and laughed. "I must run back into the forest," she thought. "They will hear me." When she came back, the fish servant wasn't there. The frog servant was sitting on the ground near the door. He was looking up into the sky. Alice went up to the door and knocked. "Don't knock," said the frog servant. "I'm on this side of the door. Who will open the door for you? And the people in the house are making such a noise that nobody will hear you." He was right. There was a great noise in the house. They were shouting and sneezing. They were breaking dishes and plates to pieces. "Please," said Alice politely, "how can I get into the house?" There was no answer from the frog servant. "How can I get into the house?" asked Alice again. "I shall sit here for a long time," answered the frog servant. "I shall sit here all day." At this moment the door opened and a large plate flew out of the house. It hit the servant's nose, fell on the ground and broke to small pieces. "I think I shall sit here all day tomorrow too," the servant said in the same tone. He was looking up into the sky all the time, and Alice thought, "I'm sure he doesn't see what is happening in front of his nose because he is always looking up." "How can I get into the house?" asked Alice a third time. "Why do you want to get into the house?" asked the frog. Alice didn't like his tone. All these animals talk too much, she thought. But the frog servant didn't wait for her answer. "I shall sit here," he said, "many, many days and nights." "But what shall I do?" asked Alice. "What do you want to do?" asked the frog. "Why am I talking to him?" thought Alice. "He's very stupid." And she opened the door and went in. She was in a large kitchen now. It was very hot there. The Duchess was sitting in the middle of it on a chair, which had only 3 legs. She had a baby in her arms. The cook was cooking something in a large pot. "The pot is full of soap," thought Alice, "and there is too much pepper in that soap." She began to sneeze, and we sneezed and sneezed because there was pepper in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed. The poor baby was sneezing all the time. It cried and sneezed and cried. But the cook didn't sneeze. A large cat was sitting on the floor. It was grinning from ear to ear. "Please, will you tell me," asked Alice politely, "why your cat grins?" "Because it's a Cheshire cat," answered the Duchess. "Pig." She cried out at the last word so suddenly that Alice jumped up. The next moment she saw that the Duchess was speaking to the baby and not to her. Alice began again. How funny that cats can grin. They all can, said the Duchess, and most of them too do. I didn't know that, Alice said very politely. She was glad to talk to the Duchess. You don't know much, said the Duchess, and that is a fact. Alice didn't like her tone. She wanted to talk about something else. Suddenly, the cook began to throw plates and dishes at the Duchess and the baby. The Duchess didn't look angry when they hit her, but Alice jumped up and cried, "Oh, what are you doing? You may play with the baby for a few minutes, if you like. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen." said the Duchess and threw the baby at Alice. Alice caught the baby and went out with it into the open air. I must take this child away with me, or they will kill it, thought Alice. The baby wasn't crying, but suddenly it began to grunt like a pig. Don't grunt, said Alice. You are not a pig, you are a baby. But when she looked at the child, she saw that it wasn't a baby, it was a little pig. What shall I do with the pig at home? thought Alice. No, I can't take it with me. She put the little animal on the grass and it ran away into the forest. Alice walked into the forest. Suddenly she saw the Cheshire cat. It was sitting in a tree. The cat asked Alice, "Will you play croquet with the Queen today?" "I like to play croquet very much," answered Alice. "But I don't know the Queen and the Queen doesn't know me." "You will see me there," said the cat and disappeared. Alice waited for some time and after a few minutes the cat appeared again. "By the by, what became of the baby?" asked the cat. "It became a pig," answered Alice. "That's right," said the cat. Suddenly the end of the cat's tail disappeared. Then its body disappeared, then its head. Now Alice could see in the air only the cat's grin, but soon the grin disappeared too. "Well," said Alice, "I know many cats without a grin, but a grin without a cat. How funny!"